can use chat, so that's fine. I did see the assignments you turned in late last night, so great. Let's just look at what needs to be done this week. Let's back up here out of this thing. I presume you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. So the last section of the book is the operations and maintenance section, chapters 23 to 27, having to do with a number of issues of how do you basically run the facility. And part of it's structural, and part of it is sort of legal and functional. The contracting stuff, you'll have as a facilities manager a lot of contracts that you'll manage. The contracts can be maintenance, they can be security, they can be for food service, they can be for almost anything. Certainly, major construction or reconstruction in a facility would be handled by a contractor. You're unlikely to have a building crew on board. You'll have some people able to do light maintenance, minor repairs, depending on the size of the facility. But for the most part, if you need major work done or hard maintenance, then it'll have to be done by contract. Okay, let's move this over here. Okay, so and there is no one size fits all. There's no one type of contract, and there is no one contractor who's going to do everything for you. If you run into a contractor who claims that they can do it all, I would suggest you just walk away from them, because they can't. There isn't anyone capable of doing that. And even if they are, they're going to be hideously expensive. There's obviously a very great difference between having to have major structural modifications and running a food service. So there's very much, so you need to have that, and you need to make liberal use of your lawyers for that. Contracts have a way of turning messy. I've been involved in a number of them that have gotten very unpleasant. And having good lawyers has saved my hide on a number of occasions. If we look at the chapter on work coordination, there's a lot of material in there about things like a work coordination center or whatever. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a good example of why you want someone that, first off, they need to be stable, and second off, they need to have a good track record of doing this. The problem with the VA is it's a government agency, and they have to go with the lowest bidder type contracts. Those are that ought to be just completely thrown out by our government. Lowest bidder contracts really, yeah. Lowest bidder contracts, by their very nature, attract bids that aren't legitimate. My personal opinion is that you should get at least 3 bids on any contract, and throw out the lowest and throw out the highest, because the one in the middle is more likely to be accurate. Unless there's good reason to think the highest bidder has done a better job of estimating the workload. So you have to study those things. But lowest bidder contracts are are always messy. And the government has lots and lots of stories about that and about cost overruns. The government's never been willing to hold these guys hold their feet to the fire. You bid this much, you've charged this much, the rest of it's on you. And oh, by the way, if you don't do this job, you'll never get another contract from the government. That's my personal opinion. But I hate to see my taxpayer money being thrown away. It happens all the time. Basic operations, if you look at it from a healthcare side, basic operations are fairly consistent throughout many organizations, not just healthcare organizations and others, but you've got basically managing the environmental controls and cleaning and just overall keeping the lights on and the water running are pretty much going to be the same in any kind of facility. In healthcare, we have your operation is going to be including something that you wouldn't have at a YDOT facility, like food service. We have to be able to feed our patients, which means we have to have an operating kitchen. The kitchen can be run under contract. You don't have to have internal employees. Most of them do. Most hospitals and nursing homes have people on staff to take care of that. But you also have other kinds of facilities, other kinds of services in healthcare facilities, rehab services. You have physical therapy areas. You have treatment areas that you have to have. You have a number of things that are a little bit different. In a long-term care, you have to have recreational facilities of some sort. So you have a gym of some sort. We're not talking about a big, complicated gym here. We're talking about something that will allow your patients. You do have at the headquarters. Yeah, it's contracted out, right? But at you would have a facility there that has to be in working order at all times. You have part of running a facility is you have contractual obligations as well as the basic healthcare obligations, contractual obligations to provide services to your exactly, the activities manager. But you have contractual obligations to provide these services to your clientele, your customers. And so there are other kinds of, just going and looking at a medically related facility, long-term facilities, there's an awful lot there. Okay. Yeah. That's right. You have to provide the ability to transport your patients because many of them are not ambulatory, or at least poorly so. And looking at places to try and find for my father back in January when I was on the East Coast, I actually got a pretty good education as to what's there. I had a pretty good idea because my wife has worked in home health and done contract work at nursing homes for many, many years. So I had a pretty good idea, but, you know, walking around and saying, okay, this is where my father might be living. What do they have for him? Really opened up my eyes quite a bit more than the sort of academic view that I had until I was actually 30. So the basic operations, including just really making certain that the HVAC is working properly, that we have regular maintenance on those. Internal maintenance usually is handled by your facility staff. Things like filters on the HVAC, replacing burnt out lighting fixtures, basic cleaning is a maintenance sort of issue. Those are generally, cleaning is often handled under contract. You have a cleaning service coming in. But basic maintenance, you have to have somebody there that can change the lights, that can change the filters, can get out there and clear off the sidewalks, for instance. Although if you have a parking facility, you may have an arrangement with a local contractor to come in and plow it. You have to have that sort of preparation for weather, you know, anywhere. In fact, when I was back in southern Maryland back in January, we had 3 snowstorms there, and that just looking at how people handled that, they did a good job. But part of it's contract, and part of it's you get somebody from your maintenance department out there shoveling snow off the sidewalks, because you cannot afford to have your patients falling down. Major repairs would be handled under contract, and you'd probably have someone for that. Let's see. They have a department for everything, but they do contract out the cleaning. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That is another typical sort of governmental approach. And, you know, because you do have to have some basic, you know, somebody has to take out the trash, but, you know, and clean the toilets and that sort of thing. That's typical. But yeah, I can understand. That probably didn't sit well with the people working out there. Yeah, and that's part of the issue. It's one of the reasons that we have some problems with those there. That is always a good idea. That's as we both know from our healthcare backgrounds here and studying it. Those are great places to get sick, and great ways to. And finally, managing the services. A lot of services, you know, food services, I said, is one of those things that we contract out, and cleaning services. Somebody has to manage that, and that falls to the facilities management function. I believe that. I believe that. I am not surprised. You know, people don't quite understand how easy it is for that to be found. Anyway, all of these things are different aspects. The book goes into a pretty good explanation of these different types of functions. But let's go back to chapter 24, the work coordination. The only place, you know, there are so many things have to be done, and the facilities manager is in that office really is responsible for coordinating all of this stuff. And that means anything done under contract, it means cleaning, it means food service, it means security. A lot of times security is contracted out to professional security organizations. And to some extent, that's a good idea. You want people who are actually trained in that rather than just give it to somebody on staff and say, okay, you're security manager. That doesn't usually work out very well. Someone who's had some training in that. The other things, just all of these things, operations, maintenance and repair and services work through what the book calls a work coordination center, which basically means the facilities office. This also is the place where we coordinate any sort of emergency work that needs to be done, emergency efforts, disaster recovery, and other kinds of things that affect the running of the operation. You can't have too many people directing. You have to have a central place to avoid confusion and mistakes and duplication. This also means that this office is responsible for training people for these kinds of things and making certain that people know what to do in the case of something, whether it's an emergency or who to contract if they need to have their light bulbs changed. And that's the Work Coordination Center, should be the clearinghouse. Your book calls it the heartbeat of the facilities management function. And in a small organization, like most long-term care facilities are indeed small operations, that means that basically you've got one or two people that are part of the facilities management team. Obviously, we got a couple of things going on. Healthcare facility doesn't shut its lights out at night and go home. They work 24 hours a day. So you have the necessity there of having somebody on site who can take care of immediate needs all the time. And in many cases, it's going to be one of the the shift staff will be designated to be in charge of this and determining what needs to be done right now. I mean, if there's a light bulb out at 3 a.m., the chances are it doesn't need to be changed instantaneously. If, however, the HVAC system goes down at 3 a.m., somebody needs to be there to deal with getting somebody in to fix it. And your senior facilities manager is going to be a person who's going to be on call 24/7. And even if you're on vacation in Cabo, you may get a phone call and have to coordinate some activity or at least direct somebody else to take care of it. Ultimately, you have to have an infrastructure that allows solving immediate and necessary problems 24/7. So that also falls to the facilities management function, is to make sure that there is a way to have everything taken care of. I remember a number of years ago in North Carolina, we had a Kmart, totally unrelated to healthcare, of course, but we had a Kmart that got literally flattened by a tornado. And the good part here was that it happened at about midnight. So it was closed, and there wasn't anyone there, so no one got hurt. But we don't have that luxury in healthcare. Um, out on the plains, we have tornadoes, and we also have healthcare facilities. So we would, it would be something to be aware of, that there's not going to be a time when someone isn't going to be there. Now, many healthcare type facilities do close. Doctors' offices are closed at night. Urgent care usually closes by sometime late in the night. There are very few of those that are 24-hour standing facilities, but your long-term care facilities never close, and your hospitals and other kinds of facilities are always open. So someone has to be there with the authority to make decisions on the spot, which means training, which is part of the facilities management function. So, there are when you're going through these chapters, there are a lot of things that are pretty obvious, but there are other things to think about in terms of the unique position of healthcare facilities. All of our planning for maintenance, for repair, for if someone has, if your facility has a pipe burst in a patient room, what are you going to do with that patient? The patient needs to be gone. So you need to have planning in place for all of these things. We're not worried about that. If a pipe bursts at Whole Foods at 3 a.m. in the bathroom, it's going to be a mess the next morning, but nobody's likely to get harmed by it. But at a healthcare facility, at a 24-hour operation, we have to think about the issues that will affect our patients. And so we have to look at all of those things. Plus, we have basic safety regulations that we deal with. We can turn non-essential lights out, but there always has to be emergency lighting. There always has to be a way, if a patient has to be moved in the middle of the night, there has to be a way to do that safely. And that can be anything from a medical emergency to, as I said, a pipe bursting in a room. The other aspects of that are we have state regulations that we have to follow, and those are going to vary everywhere you work. So you have to be familiar with your state regulations for healthcare facilities. You have to be familiar with the Joint Commission guidelines for running these facilities. So there are a whole lot of things that when you go in, you need to really study. If you're a new hire as a facilities manager, you're going to spend your first few weeks really just tearing into the facility and understanding what is there and what may still be needed to be added in terms of things like policies and procedures and that sort of thing. But your first job will be to find out what is the condition of the structure of the building. What does it look like? How is it running? And you'd probably want to be there, not just looking at how it is being operated during normal working hours, but you might want to walk in someday at 3 a.m. just to see how things are going, just to see how it's operating, see if everything is really as the facility guidelines want. So there's a lot to think about in terms of basic operations after you've done all the other stuff that's in the earlier part of the book that we've talked about, there's the day-to-day stuff. And it's your job as a facilities manager your job is to make sure that those things are well in place and operating smoothly. That is a very, very good question, because if you're talking about a state agency like WYDOT and a place like your port of entry, then you're going to you're going to have to deal with how can we keep the place open, and it's going to take some finesse and some diplomacy dealing with people to find funds that are needed. This is there should be, your book has a guideline about a maintenance budget, which is 3 to 4% of the value of the building or the structure and its internal workings per year should be budgeted for maintenance. The biggest problem we have is having something major and running out of money in the middle of trying to get something. But the frustration of working with a state agency is that they do things like cut maintenance out of budgets to try and keep the budget down, rather than recognizing that some things need to be available. There are almost always discretionary emergency funds at the state level for things that are needed. The issue is trying to access that money. The nursing home industry has a pretty bad reputation, in some cases well deserved, unfortunately, because their facilities don't appear to be maintained very well. That is a real issue of a mix of local and corporate management. The thing is that what you find is, and in this case, I've seen this happen. You wonder how they're up and running, and they're up and running because when the state says that they're going to come in and inspect, all of a sudden there's this scurry of activity of cleaning it up. If the state pulled off surprise inspections, an awful lot of nursing homes would be closed down, or at least be given a time frame in which they had to fix things or close. Many of them would simply close because they are run down, they're old. Many of them are incapable of being brought up to speed. I was in a number of them when I was out in Maryland in January, and they ranged all the way from looking a lot like, 4-star hotels, which one of them was actually a converted Holiday Inn, and was the nicest one that we were in. The rest of them looked like your typical nursing home, a bunch of different hallways with rooms, and memory units and a rehab wing, and the usual structures. The ones that we were in at least looked and smelled clean, and that's one of the things that I use as a criterion, is how does it smell, and how do the patients look? Are they happy? When I was looking for my dad, I would go in and I'd talk to patients. I'd say, "How do you like it here?" You know, what's the good stuff? And patients will be pretty open. And the facilities themselves can be pretty run down. And unfortunately, many of them are part of chains. There's one chain, I won't name them because I don't, because it would be not a good idea to name names, but there's one chain that I would not put a person that I didn't like into, simply because I have been in so many of their facilities. They don't have sufficient staff. They're not very well run, and so the issue is that many of these homes are at an age that it's difficult, and the problem is we need them. In some cases, the only reason they're still in operation is because they may be the only, they may be absolutely necessary to handle the patient. And the patient load is increasing because we are an aging society. But again, it's part of the facilities manager's job every year to prepare a budget. Yeah. 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 I wouldn't be surprised if that's common. One of the things that I did to avoid that particular thing is I'd go in unannounced and ask for a tour. So they were sort of stuck. And the thing is, if somebody says, well, we can't give you a tour, then they're off the list. Because either they don't have enough staff. If there's an emergency going on, that's one thing. But they either don't have enough staff or they're not willing to have you see the dirty laundry, right? But yeah, that was what I did. I would go in, I just drop in unannounced, and to do that because that's the only way you're going to find out what it's really like. Fortunately, most of the places we visited were able to do that. We had one place that could not give us a tour, and then they said, well, we really don't have anyone to give you a tour, but we also don't have any beds available, so I don't know what a tour would do for you. I said, well, thanks for that honesty, and left. It was a facility I very much wanted to see because it was new. And the reason it was full is because it was new and nice. But that one had to be taken off the list. But there are two things. There's the quality of care, and that's something the facility manager has nothing to do with. And then there's the facility itself. Now, if in a long-term care facility, if you put your emphasis on quality of care and didn't emphasize maintenance as much, that may be quite appropriate, in the long run, because really the quality of care is important. But the facility itself has to meet certain basic standards, and part of the job of the facilities manager is to have a budget and to make the budget proposal for each year for what maintenance could be. Guidelines like 3 to 4% of the value of the building just for maintenance are a good way to start. And I would always probably, if I were running, my annual request would probably be closer to 5, knowing that somebody's going to cut it. So, but that's one way of making certain that you have enough of a maintenance budget. And, if you have the money budgeted and don't spend it, well, nobody complains if you don't spend the money except the government. You know, you have to spend the money, which is another, um, which is another mess, another issue that I don't want to get into right now. That's just appropriate. But nonetheless, what you want to do is be prepared, and yeah, I bet you do. Is be prepared, and then if you don't spend the money, nobody's going to complain about it, because all these facilities are always on a short budget. But one of the biggest mistakes an organization can make is not budgeting for maintenance. Because when you don't maintain systems, and this is for little things like annual inspections of the HVAC equipment, that's a maintenance issue. And it's not an expensive process. You're going to pay a few $100s to have somebody come in and do a check. Then they're going to catch problems that could come back and hit thousands of dollars in terms of repairs. So, you know, we all know, we know it in healthcare, that it's easier to maintain our health than it is to get it back. The same with a building. It's easier to maintain a building than to fix it when it goes down. Yeah, that was one of the things that I looked at in the facilities that I went to, was the quality of their food prep. And it probably wouldn't surprise you that the one that was the converted Holiday Inn had the best kitchen, because it was built as a commercial kitchen to begin with, and then they had the good sense to hire an experienced chef. You don't need a cordon bleu chef at a nursing home, but you need someone who can make appetizing food. And yeah, I've seen some stuff that was. I can remember my mother when she was going through some health issues and had to be in an institution for a while. I can remember her talking about the pig slop. So I can relate to that. Yeah, and again, getting someone who knows how to cook for a large group, someone who's an excellent home cook, isn't necessarily going to be a good cook in an institution, because the scale is such that you need to think differently about how you prepare it. And so again, having a good kitchen staff is again part of the facility services, and so that contract would be yours, because not a whole lot of organizations have their own internal chef. The best ones actually do. The converted Holiday Inn that I told you about, their chef was an employee of the company. So that's a little different than contracted out, because then the employee of the company has to work within the food budget. Then you're not adding in the overhead of having a contractor who wants to maximize profit from their contract. So there's a lot of different ways of approaching it. But one of the biggest problems that I see with almost any organization is in their facilities is having a proper budget for maintenance and repairs. Yeah, that is a good that's a good policy. Yes, the staff if they're hungry, they're not thinking well, their reaction time is bad, they're grumpy. Most of us are when we're hungry, I'll have to admit that, which is why so many people hate diets, because they think they're starving all the time and they're in a bad mood. But that's nutrition's a totally different thing. But yeah, again, the good places will make sure that the employees can eat. My mother-in-law was actually here in Johnstown. She broke her femur number 2.5 years ago now. No, a year and a half ago now. And was in the Northern Colorado Rehabilitation Hospital here in Johnstown, which is a very good facility. And what they did was they had a kitchen. The staff was pretty good, and the food was actually, I thought, quite adequate. I mean, it was not like going to a 5-star restaurant, but it was sort of like home cooking, and that's basically, we had people who were doing home cooking. And on top of that, I think the employees got to eat for free. I know the visitors paid, I mean, it was like $3 a meal.
Not bad.
Basically the cost of the food itself to eat. And so we would go over there and eat with her, at least a couple of meals a day. And so but that facility was special. It's probably one of the best rehab hospitals I've ever seen. But clearly, I'm thinking about that and the way it was laid out. Their facilities included, as a rehab hospital, they had one heck of a PT department, and that department was well equipped. And from what I could tell, because we used to take her down there for her PT, and of course my wife as a PT was having a very critical eye. But from what I could tell, the equipment was not only appropriate, but very well maintained. And they had a huge staff. I think they probably had, in the gym, there was always a 1-to-1 ratio of therapist to patient, at least. And a couple of times there were a couple of people back in the office who were ready to come out when necessary. But very well done. But they had their cafeteria, they had their rehab area, and then they had 1, 2, 3, I think 4 wings of rooms, and a good staff. So it was an impressive operation that was there. But that's, as I say, that's probably one of the best of those facilities I've ever seen. And we chose it because we talked to some of our friends and family here who are in medicine, mainly nurses, and said, what's a good place to go? And the uniform recommendation was Northern Colorado Rehab. So, and we do that recommendation. My nursing friends on these things are very critical. So anyway, the thinking about, again, having the employees eat there is thinking about what's good for the customer. And then that kind of thinking costs a little bit more money, but in the long run, it makes a lot more, because when people are happy to be there, they're recommending it to their friends and other acquaintances who need it. And so the thing is that you have to have customers, you have to have residents. Some of the places I've been in were half empty. Yeah, the word of mouth is the most effective advertising you can ever have. That's why people ask a lot of times for would you write a recommendation? Well, the answer in many cases is no, but I understand why they're doing it. They want people to hear from somebody other than their advertising people about how wonderful a place is, which is, of course, why when I was looking at places, I'd try to talk to the residents, because they're the ones who are going to be, pretty honest. I don't expect anyone to, any facility to have 100% satisfaction. There's always somebody who's dissatisfied. But if you talk to 3 or 4 people and, they say, this is a fine place, I'm enjoying it, that's what you need. But anyway, going back to this week, so this is the reading. Let's take a look at the assignments here. Your assignment 1 is to look at the operational efficiencies of your organization. And if you can think about how this relates to healthcare, that's a good idea as well. But you're fairly, at this point, you're really you're understanding pretty well the way your facility operates. So if you want to stay with that, that's okay with me. I know that makes it a little easier, but it also think about how that applies to healthcare as well. So that's the major assignment this week. We have a discussion, I think. Let me go back here. Come on, back up. All right. We have our discussion this week, and the discussion itself is to think about how the entire material that we've dealt with in this course, how that can support patient flow and optimize patient flow. Think about if you were at CareBridge, you might think back into that organization and see how that how the operational and facilities made it easy or difficult for to deal with patient flow. Or think about hospitals you may have been in and take a look at how they manage it. It's really a kind of critical issue in terms of caring, because moving patients around is both time consuming and has its risks for the patients. So give that some thought as well in that discussion. I'll be interested in hearing what you have to say. Let's go back to, we have a final assessment, and then we have the career integration. So please make sure you do that as well. The rest of that is I'd like to go to take a quick look at the grade book. There are some things that are missing. The week 2 discussion you can still do. Okay. And the assignment 2 out of weeks 1 and 2 you can also still get done. But there's not a whole lot other than that. Other than this week's work, you've been keeping up very well with the daily checkpoints, and so let's finish this week out. I understand the weather's supposed to get nasty starting tomorrow. Okay, I'll go look for that that other assignment too, because I didn't find it. So if I can't find it, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'll send you an email. And if I do find it, I'll let you know. So just to be sure. All right. So let's catch up on this and get all this work out of the way so we can get through this class. We're close. Let's see. What do we have here? Yeah, you're a little over 50% of the total of the class. So your current position is actually a little higher than that. So let's go ahead and finish this out so that we can be done with this class and you can move on to finishing out your program. I don't know how much time you have left to finish, how much work is still left for you to finish out the program, but you've got to be getting close to finishing. But that's really, yeah, that's great. I bet you're ready for that.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have any other questions or thoughts? Okay, in that case, I don't know what your work schedule is right now, but please try and get as much as you can done. It seemed to me that your work schedule changed and you have different hours than the first couple of weeks. Get this out of the way. And I know, as I said, we're hearing that there's supposed to be a nasty storm, especially out on the Eastern Plains coming. So be careful with that. Believe me, I will. Fortunately, I don't have to be out too much, although I will be teaching when it's supposed to start hitting us on tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. So I have no obligations that I must attend to other than teaching. So yeah, we're going to stay safe and inside. And I get the fun of shoveling snow. Okay, well, if there's nothing else you need to talk about, yeah, we have kids that will come by now and again. It's always like to see kids out there trying to be little entrepreneurs. But also it gives me a chance to get some exercise that I would never get.
True.
So if that's the case, I've been recording this. So I'll post that recording as well. And so you be safe, be warm, and let's and I will do the same. And I may record just something real quickly to close out the class for Thursday morning. If so, I'll send you an email.
Okay.
In that case, have a good day, and I'll probably see you again in class.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now.